to folks have asked me to have this recorded so that they can view it later if they wish. So with that, something funky is happening with my screen. We're going to hear the presentations first, and then we will go to question and answers. I'm going to ask folks to please be muted, and I will call on you. You can raise your hand sort of in the using the raise hand feature if you know how to do that, and then I will call on you in order. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Siegel from SGL Development, who's going to introduce the folks from his staff who are here, and we also have Aram Farouk, who is the Assistant City Manager of Community Development from the city, who's here in case there are some questions around zoning or any questions for the city to answer. So with that, Adam, why don't you take it away?
Perfect. Thank you, Mark, for setting this meeting up. I'm Adam Siegel. I'm one of the developers along with my partner sitting next to me, David Paul.
Nice to meet everyone.
We have our architect, Anam Chen Wei, on as well, who developed all these plans.
Good evening, everyone.
Perfect. So what we'd like to do, as Mark said, we have two sets of plans we're going to present tonight. We already permitted one set, and we have building permits in hand for 5 units. And we'll walk through that set of plans first. And then after talking to a lot of the neighbors, our neighbors of the project and other members of the community, we've got some strong feedback that people said they'd like to see a replacement store, market, cafe. Different people have different ideas of what would be best. So we have an alternative set of plans that Anam put together, and we've been kind of refining over the last couple of days that we'd like to present as well. That set of plans would require many variances. We haven't really looked into it yet, the exact type or what variance would be required, but it would not conform to zoning. So we need relief for that ulterior plan set. So why don't we start with the first plan set right now. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see that? Okay. Can people hear me? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. So here's the down at the bottom of the screen is Pearl Street. And on the right side of the screen, if you can see my cursor, this is William Street. So if people are familiar with the area, they'll know Unit 1 is the yellow house, or was yellow house, that's now been fully gutted, but it's still standing right here. Unit 2 is where the market was located. And then Unit 3 and 4 are where the parking lot was located. And Unit 5 is where a garage was located, roughly. So the by right plan that we currently have permitted is 5 units. 3 of them are detached, 2 of them are attached. Each unit has a parking space that's kind of in the center of the property. And then each unit has outdoor space around the unit. They're townhouse style. They walk in, they have a first and second floor, and also a finished basement as well. All the units are roughly 2,250, 2,300 square feet, including the lower level. I can get into some elevations here, or I want to switch my view. Okay. So right here we have the Pearl Street elevation. So the Pearl Street elevation has on the corner Unit 2, and where the parking lot was Unit 3 and 4. So this is the elevation from Pearl Street. And if people have questions, I can go back to these at a later time to look into all the items. I'm not going to go through the floor plans because I think this is more important to look at streetscapes and the overall project and not delve into details at this time. So this is the rear elevation. this is interior. So these units on that face Pearl Street are really set up to, they have Pearl Street almost as their backyard, and their front yard is the interior courtyard. Let me get to the William Street side. Okay, so do we have a view of William Street?
Yeah, that's the one on the bottom right corner.
This is okay. So this is the, well, this is
Yeah.
okay. So this is the side of Unit 2 on William Street. We don't have a full side elevation of William Street showing Unit 1 and Unit 2. But let me go back to the original screen. So from the William Street side, you're seeing the side of Unit 2 here, and then the front of Unit 1, which would be here. So we close up the curb cut that exists now along Pearl Street. There's currently a curb opening right here on William Street, and all the parking would enter off of William Street with 4 spaces here, 1 space here, and then private outdoor space for each unit is either behind it or adjacent to it. Is there anything you want to add to this? Can you hear me?
She muted.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute.
No problem.
No, I think you have said everything.
Okay. So that's the, if people want to get into more detail looking at the interior of the units, we can do that later, but I don't think that's that important for this meeting. And all of these, everything I'm sharing here, I can share with Mark, so it can be, everyone can have a copy of it later. That's I think Mark can distribute that. That's good with him. Okay. So here's an alternative scheme. This is the site plan. I think we can look at the site plan, but I think maybe we'll look at a 3D model first. So this is a alternative scheme that we came up with, where we have a commercial space on the first floor and the second floor, and then we have 4 townhouse style units to the left of the commercial space. This is fronting Pearl Street. So this is Pearl Street right here. This is the existing location of the store on the corner, with William Street being here. This house in the background is also part of the project, the existing yellow house. And then the house behind it would also remain. We can see on the site plan later. And then there's 3 smaller studio units that are on the set back from the street and set back on the sides, but on the top floor. And those would have deck areas that we can see in the site plan on the front and rear of the structure. So this is a diagonal view, or a angle view, and then we have a straight view as well. So this is on Watson Street looking across Pearl Street. Again, we can go back to these images later when people have questions. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4 row house style units, and then 1, 2, 3 smaller studio units above. Let me go to the site plan. So in this scheme, Unit 1 and Unit 2 remain the same. We have Unit 3, 4, 5, and 6, which are the residential row house style units with the corner commercial unit. All of these units are on the first and second story. And then we have Units 7, 8, 9 set back from the street and the sides on the third story. And these would be accessed by a rear stairwell enclosed right here. That's what this gray box is. Important to note with this scheme is we have more units and we have less parking. So we only are providing two dedicated parking spaces for Unit 2 and Unit 1, And then we have a third parking space as a shared space. Now, we thought about this a little bit, and it's not fully thought out, but this, we'd probably provide a car that would somehow have to be managed amongst these units that they could share. And that's not fully sussed out yet, but that's the intent. We also have bike parking right here. And then we have outdoor space around the back, and we have smaller amount of outdoor space on the front. These units do not conform to the front yard setback, but it's important to note that the adjacent houses, both on our, if you're facing them on Pearl Street on the left side and on the other side of William Street, they're only set back about 5 feet as well. So we're not proud of what the neighbors are. And the parking would, again, the driveway would remain on William Street, entering from the same location in the current plan. I have an aerial view I can also show as well. So this shows the proposed project, our neighbor here on Cottage Street, a neighbor here on William Street. So you can see their setback is about 5 feet as well. This one might be a little more than 5 feet. And then this is that large mansard style building across the street with the 2 other units as part of this project. Was there anything else you think I should add? Right
No,
now?
I think you have covered all, maybe on when the neighbors have questions.
Okay. So I think that's really all we have from our side on our presentation. We're more than happy to answer whatever questions people may have on whatever scheme, or it'd be great if Ron could jump in if there were zoning questions if we're able to answer, just to make sure our answers are accurate.
Great, thank you, Adam. There is just one question someone just put in the chat while you have the slides up. Is there an aerial shot or visual of completed first permitted proposal?
There's not. We didn't put together any renderings of the original proposal because it wasn't required, and we didn't. It's already permitted. We didn't really feel the need to, so we don't have any renderings of the current permitted proposal.
Okay. And then another question, is in the permitted proposal, would there be a fence or barrier between Pearl Street and the backyards?
Okay, so I imagine that would be. So yes, there's right here, there's a fence with gates. Right, a gate right here, a gate right here, and a gate right here. And there'd be a fence along Pearl Street.
All right, so I'm just going to go through some of these couple things that have popped up in the chat, and then folks
Sure.
can raise their hand and I'll call on them. If you were to get zoning relief from the city to build a bigger project, which I think you should do, we need the housing. Would you be open to making a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust that is a substantial portion of your incremental profit between the as of right and upzoning version?
Yeah, it's something that we can definitely look into. Right now, I mean, this commercial space from an economic standpoint, it's really it's not that economical. Building this larger project, it takes us out of the 1 and 2 family building code. It puts us into the multifamily building code, which entails more fire separation, sprinklers, a lot more building compliance items that increase our building costs in this whole townhouse style space. And then we're trying to provide a really nice commercial space. And typically these commercial spaces in the neighborhoods, they're not, the value of them to the community is great, but the value of them monetarily to the owner is not that great. The rent in the Pearl Street market, for example, was a I think $3,000 a month. So the cost to build this is quite great, and what's being achieved by the developer, the owner of that commercial condo, isn't a lot of money. It's actually costing more to build it than it's worth once it's done in today's market. And that's so we'd have to weigh that cost as well, kind of the give to the community by providing the market versus the cost of providing it.
Another question, and Rosalie, I'll go to you in 1 second. In the commercial space proposal, what is the square footage of the commercial space, and what kinds of uses can fit into that square footage?
So it's right here, it's listed as 1,856 square feet. That's over 2 levels. We haven't looked at uses that carefully. It's something we could do further. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, we'd be open to really we're looking at it as a community give. So we'd be open to, I mean, it'd be hard to restrict a type of business. More, we could have a type of use, but to say it has to be a convenience store would be, I'm not sure if the tenant is out there for a convenience store. It might be a market. It might be. We haven't done much market research on the marketability of that space.
One thing, just my own comment, not a question from the group, but one thing that's I think we see a lot is that when a development is being planned and folks from the community say we want X type of business there, we forget that you have to then find someone who wants to run that type of business at that location. Right. So if you think about where the old Massey's site is, where they,
Yes.
where they built a couple of years ago, I worked with the neighborhood on that, and the neighborhood was really insistent on, they wanted that commercial space to be some kind of coffee house, bakery kind of thing. They didn't want a bank. They didn't want a daycare center. They wanted a coffee shop. And now, obviously, COVID has affected a lot of things, but 2.5 years later, that space is still vacant because they're looking for someone who wants to open a coffee shop in the middle of a busy intersection with no parking, right? So my guess is that that is going to stay empty for a really long time until some people agree that it can be opened up to be rented for other purposes. So, people may say, yes, I think what I've heard from folks is they're really upset about losing that convenience store and having that market there. So when you're thinking about uses, I don't think people would be as excited if you said, oh, we're going to put in a Bank of America. But to say it has to be a convenience store, that is complicated, right? You have to find someone to run it and want to do that. And we see a lot of in developments that get built in Cambridge where we require retail go in and certain types of retail go in. More often than not, those spaces stay empty for a really long time. All right, I'm going to, Rosalie, you can unmute yourself, I think.
Yeah, okay. I really like the second option because I think we do need a lot more housing. I also think the commercial thing, I miss the Pearl Street Market, but I don't see that as really very viable. But this is maybe a small thing, but it's something that's really rampant in our neighborhood with new construction, and it's fences along the street. Cambridge does not have a good fence regulations that many communities have. You can't build along the street a fence more than 4 feet high. But all of these fences really make a big difference in terms of the walkability of a neighborhood. So I would just urge you, forget about the fence, make it open to the street. I think it makes a really big difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to respond to that, I really agree with Rosalie. I think a lot of these decisions we as developers make, having the units face the inside, some of these are not the best decisions for design, but the reason why they're made is because their zoning dictates a lot of these decisions where in order to have a by right project, we do things that aren't that great for the community a lot of times. So it's really contradictory, and it's frustrating as a developer. And I'm sure, it's frustrating for the community as well.
And Rosalie, could you, anybody who raises their hand as opposed to putting a question in the chat, can you just lower your hand when you're done, just so I don't get
Yeah.
confused? Thank you. Ryan Belmore?
Hi, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I actually used to live here. I lived at 4A William Street up until August. I lived there for 5 years. My roommate lived there for 15. Adam, we've met. You've been in my apartment before. And I kind of want to start off by saying our interactions with Adam in terms of moving out and transition have been phenomenal. He's a stand-up guy, and I'm really happy that we're engaging in this process in a really good faith way. And I hope everybody can, add some nice positivity to that. I, having again lived there for 5 years, I always thought it was such a waste to have that big parking lot that's low density. And so I support any sort of variance to have option number 2 and understand the point about the commercial space. It's nice, but the Pearl Street Market really only sold cigarettes and Keno. And that's like, it was nice for the people who went, but it wasn't that like, I think people love that kind of idea of a black sheep bagel market, but that can't be on every corner. Yeah, so I just want to say I support any sort of variance. If there's any sort of help I can give, that's great, because we do need the housing. And what made that apartment great at 4A William Street was actually the neighbors, the fact that we got to look across our balcony at the other balcony and get to know people and have that street level. And I would make friends with the people who lived under the Central Square Library on my way to the T station. And the neighbors are great. And I think that's leaning into that fact of having more neighbors is a good thing for a neighborhood, not necessarily the aesthetics are the most important part. So yeah, that's just what I want to say.
Great, thank you. Back to the chat questions. Also in the commercial space proposal, how large would the units on Pearl Street be?
So, okay, go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, I think those are around 1,200 square feet per unit. The ones facing Pearl in the commercial scheme.
The townhouse style units.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry, and with the ones on top, 7, 8, 9 here, would those also be about the same size, or you said those would be studios?
Yes, those are smaller. So the studios are 520 square feet approximately.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think there's some typos in this question, so whoever asked it may have to help me. What efforts did the developer, and then it says I2, engage with neighbors before moving ahead with getting permits? When was Mr. McGovern, I assume that means aware of the project? What outreach did he engage in with neighbors when he was? So I don't know if that last part is for me or the developer. I became aware of the project couple months ago. Again, when something is an as of right project and they're just going through and getting permits from inspectional services and whatnot, those aren't things that come to the level of the council. We only get informed and really know of developments that are happening when someone is going for a zoning change or something that sort of rises to the level of the council needing to take a vote or offer some kind of opinion on. This was not one of those things, so we sort of find out about these things typically when everybody else finds out about these things. If this last question, what outreach did he engage in? If that's for me, as soon as I heard about this project and people asked me about it, I put this meeting together and asked Adam to come and talk to the community. Adam, can you talk a little bit about what outreach you've done?
Sure. I mean, prior to to putting this this second scheme together, really we just met with our abutters over the I don't know, maybe 9 months now that we've owned the property. We've had conversations with the abutters, a few of them, and let them know of our plans, and we're prepared to share our plans once we finalize them. But we didn't do any formal outreach on the by right project as we typically don't when no zoning relief or special permit is required.
This is maybe you can answer this, but or maybe Aram wants to jump in. Is it true that if the commercial proposal loses out to residential only, this property will not be able to host commercial spaces in the future under current zoning laws?
I can take a crack at that. And I will say that I was here mostly to listen. I am not the definitive word on all of the zoning. I don't know it inside out like some of our zoning staff do, but I will try my best. And I tried to answer in the chat as well. There is commercial development, this is a residency zone, so commercial development is not permitted as of right. There are some.
Oh, you muted yourself, Aram.
Apologies. There are some minor retail uses that are permitted, but a special permit would be required. So it would be a higher bar for a developer, as it would be for these folks if they are adding commercial to the development, because there's no protection just because it was there already. If it's demolished, they would have to go back and seek the same special permit that somebody in the future might have to.
Thank you. Next question, what would the unit sell for under each plan?
The total sellout or the per unit sellout?
I assume it's the per unit.
Yeah, we haven't done we've done a full economic analysis on our original plan. We haven't done a full economic analysis on this plan. What we have done, typically these units sell for around $1,000 a square foot. So on this proposed plan, these unit 1 and unit 2 will be selling probably 2.2 million, 2.3 million in that neighborhood. For the townhouses, these units will sell for 1.4, 1.5 million, and the studios would, I'd say, sell for 600,000 roughly.
Great, thank you. Pamela Kustis.
Sorry, I am curious about the total price, like you said, like if a property management multifamily company were to buy it, what you would think you'd go for. That's my first question. My second question, which is really, I guess, to the general audience, obviously there is a huge concern about housing, but I'm curious about people's opinions on the, studios fit more individuals, but the size of the first ones would be more, works better for families. So I'm just curious about the take on that too. I mean, I understand it's more units, but space is hard to come by for families as well as individuals. So interested in both sides of that.
Okay, thank you. Adam?
For the market analysis and this scheme, I'd have to add up all, the numbers that I just said, and we could come up with an aggregate value of all the units. Family style units versus studio units, I think there's a dearth of all types of units. Most new construction units that get built, especially in Cambridgeport area, are all larger units, because that's kind of what the zoning pushes us into when we develop units. I mean, we build a lot of units in Cambridgeport, and they're typically 2,000 to 2,600 square feet. We've never built a unit smaller than 1,500 square feet. And we've been building here for, 5 or 6 years. So yes, there are some smaller units here, but I think there's not many new construction studio units or 1-bedroom units that get built in this area.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and we're seeing that a lot. I mean, this has been a big discussion sort of across the city about, right now under certain zoning rules, depending on the neighborhoods, what gets incentivized to be built are larger single family homes that sell on the 2.2, 2.5, or even more. And because that's what the zoning really pushes developers to do, or is the most financially beneficial for developers. Whereas having something that having some $600,000 units, that is something that, is more in the range of a working person, a typical working person in the city, as compared to so much of what we're seeing in the city being built. So that variety is important. Please consider dedicated space for trash and recycling storage. Is there space in those plans, or how is all that going to be handled? Are folks putting stuff on the street, or is there a separate?
No, we haven't really thought it through yet. We always do have a plan for trash and recycling. It's really not in these plans. It's not located. So that's definitely a good point and very important. I don't know, Anand, if you want to speak to that, where you're thinking.
Yes. So in the commercial scheme that you have is next to the bike rack behind the commercial space. We left an area there that is for trash. Of course, the unit 1 and 2 have their own separate, trash area. So, but of course, this is very schematic. So, but we have thrown an area, and in the scheme 1, the one with the 5 units, each one has some small space for trash.
And just a quick follow-up on my own question. So does that mean that, so if that trash is gonna be on site, so that it'll be a private company that will pick up their trash, not the city? Because it's not being put on the street, or is it gonna be stored there and people will bring their barrels out like?
For all the residential units, it'll be municipal trash removal. For the commercial, I'm really not that sure how the commercial will work. Typically with the commercial, it's a private hauler. I think that's what it would be, a private hauler.
Okay. And then the only reason I ask is we sometimes hear from folks who live in areas of the city that are both commercial and residential, that sometimes if it's a private trash company, whether they're coming to pick up at a building or a residential building or a commercial building, their hours are different. And so sometimes they're picking up the trash at 5:30 in the morning and it's loud and it wakes people up. So if that was your plan, I was going to ask you to just kind of keep that in mind, because it's such a tightly packed residential neighborhood.
That's a very good point.
Neil?
Hi, yeah, so I live on at 102 Pearl, so right across the street, looking at the project. My question is, what the bedroom counts for the units on Pearl Street in this proposal? Just to the discussion earlier about unit size, I personally live in something that's around 500 square feet for a couple of years. My partner, that's not for everyone. And it seems really nice that, under this plan, there's some, and I think maybe Alan in the comments said it's nice that there are some, units that are around 2,000 square feet, maybe 2,200. I think you said some that are like 1,200, some that are 500. One of the things that I really like about Cambridgeport is that you have people of all ages, people with kids, younger people like me, people that might be retired, and they can all live here because of the different sizes of housing. So it seems like it would be it would attract different types of people for the different size units, which could be nice. But yeah, I was curious what the bedroom count would be for the redesigned units.
Sure. So the unit 3, 4, 5, and 6 would have 2 bedrooms in each unit. Unit 1 and 2 have 4 bedrooms.
And 7, 8, 9 would be studios.
Studios, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to try to get through. I see 19 responses in the chat, so I'm going to try to get through some of these. I do want to acknowledge Cambridgeport resident and new colleague on the Cambridge City Council, Councilor Burhan Azim, is with us as well. So Burhan, welcome. Next question: if units 3 through 9 each would own 1 to 2 cars, that would put a lot of burden on the neighborhood streets in terms of parking. Could anything be done to limit the number of cars?
That's more of a city question and not a developer question. I know Somerville, at least, that they have if you're close to a transit area, they're making, there's no parking required, and they're actually preventing residents from being allowed to get resident stickers. Now, I'm not sure if that's the direction Cambridge would go in or not, but that's just what a neighboring community is doing. It's out of my hands.
I would just say, just as a pulse of things that we've talked about, on the council, and certainly with other developments, you can't tell someone they can't own a car, right? So if there are two people that live, in a unit and they each want to have a car, they can buy cars. We do have, one topic that's been a topic off and on for years is in Cambridge, it's $25 to get a resident parking sticker. And so I think even if you could tell by all the snow we have, you'll notice that there's probably a lot of cars in Cambridge that are parked on the street and they'll be buried under snow for the entire winter and people don't really use them. But it's so cheap to get a parking sticker in Cambridge that, you can park a car and store it on the street and drive it once a month, and it's not a great expense. So there's been some talk about, are we charging enough for residential parking stickers? Are we in fact encouraging people to have cars who don't really use them because it's so cheap? So that issue has come up. We are talking about, and there is something on the agenda for Monday around taking away parking minimums in developments, because what we see in a lot of developments is actually car ownership in Cambridge has been declining over the years. You wouldn't know that by traffic, but there are fewer people who are owning cars in Cambridge. And you actually see a lot of the larger developments, like if you look out at Alewife, where they were required to build these massive garages at a high cost and meant they couldn't build as much housing. Those garages are like half empty because most of the people in those buildings don't own cars because they're right next to the T or whatever, but they were required to build them because that's what the zoning required them to do, and they're not being used. And it goes even further where they're not allowed to rent those spaces to anyone who doesn't live in the building. So so they just sit empty. And so there's actually, we're seeing that too. So, but I think, if any kind of if the new plan is what goes forward, there are going to have to be things like parking studies and other things done. And I think what you tend to find is that there's actually more parking than people think. It may not be directly in front of your home, but there is enough parking. This is a pretty small project altogether, probably wouldn't make that much of a difference overall. Let's see. These are just comments. I hope the townhouse option will be possible. We need the housing. We need affordable housing. Yep. And affordable is, and that's always something we debate about, what's affordable, right? And, there's subsidized housing, which is affordable housing for folks sort of really on the lower end of the economic bracket. But you could also make the argument that a $600,000 unit is affordable for two teachers, right? And who are now being priced out of the city. So that number sort of depends on people's situations, which is why a variety of housing is important. Comment, under the second plan, there's a big range of unit sizes. The big houses that are 2,000 square foot ish, the townhouse units that are 1,200, which I think is definitely large enough for families, and also the studio units. Okay, so comment. Question, with the larger number of units project with no parking, is there a city rule to make a unit or two to be below market rent? So this, at 9 units, this falls 1 unit under the inclusionary zoning requirement. So for projects that are 10 units or more, 20% of those units would need to be affordable under the city's inclusionary zoning ordinance. At 9 units, this would fall under that threshold. So if there was going to be an affordable unit, that would be something that the developer would have to agree to do on their own. I have that right, Aram?
Yes, you didn't even need me.
Hey, always nice having you here, though. I need you more than you know for these kinds of questions. So yeah, so that would be something that the developer would have to think about. And again, that ends up being all of those units that fall under inclusionary are subsidized by the developer. They're the ones that, so if it's a unit that they could get $3,000 a month for, and it's an inclusionary unit, and the person is only paying $1,000 a month because they pay 30% of their income, that $2,000 a month is paid for by the developer, not the city. So it does, that could be, certainly on smaller projects, that could be a significant difference. The larger projects can sort of, eat that cost a little easier. So Adam, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but.
Sure. I mean, this would be a for sale project, not a rental project. The
That's true.
challenge with a rental project, actually, it is easier to make the numbers work because the delta between the market rate and the affordable is not as great. With the for sale units, it's a much greater delta, where one of these townhouse units being affordable would probably sell for around 250,000. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. Where if it was a market rate unit, it'd sell for 1.4 million or so. So it's about a 1.1 million or $1.1 million difference. And then with the commercial unit being really, we're building this 1,900 square foot commercial unit that creates a lot of additional expense with the townhouse units, just because now it's a multifamily structure and not 1 and 2 family. So the overall expense is, so great of it's not really financially feasible, just with the commercial space and if one of the townhouse units was affordable. What we could, think about with making that commercial. I mean, the commercial unit, we kind of consider it as an affordable unit. I mean, even if that rent was restricted on because the commercial unit is probably going to be a lease unit, and that could be. I was thinking more of as like a community benefit, community give, where it had a reduced rent. So maybe that rent for the commercial unit is we get the exact right tenant we want, and the rent is only $1,000 a month, but it's the perfect tenant for the space. That was my thought, and I'm open to reactions from other people on that, but I think having the right tenant there is the most important, and not necessarily trying to extract the most value out of the commercial unit.
Thank you. Next question from the chat. Under the affordable housing overlay, what could be built here? Would the increased volume of units and availability of public subsidies make that option feasible? And again, just real quick, I don't want to get deep into the overlay, but for folks who don't know, that is a citywide zoning that if someone builds 100% of, and again, you're building home ownership, not rental, so maybe it's not applicable. But if you were to change your mind, if you built 100% affordable units, you would get extra height and extra density as of right. So could this be, have you thought about an AHO project?
The challenge with the AHO projects is getting the timing of getting all the tax credits together, and it takes a long time, multiple years, and the density here could be much greater than even under the townhouse scheme. I haven't done an analysis of it, but it would be much greater, and I haven't. That's not really the direction we're going, so I haven't done much analysis with that. Looking at the AHO, we're typically market rate developers. We don't get into a lot of the tax credits, so we're not as knowledgeable in that arena.
Thank you. Is the bus stop staying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'll go back. Pamela Kustis.
Hi, I also wanted to ask about the 9 units versus 10 with the affordability. And I'm just going to share this as a comment. And I spoke to Adam earlier this week. absolutely pleasant, very transparent. I was asking because I work for a data analytics company, as he knows. So I just wanted to share, as you guys talk about that second option with the townhouses, given COVID, studio vacancy has gone up like a lot considerably. As far as affordability. So being, that this is a market rate development, I know he's saying we need more housing, but that might be really difficult. So I'm just trying to, offer that other perspective. As vacancies have gone down across the board between studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom, they're now in Cambridge, 3.8% for 4 to 5 star housing, 3.4% for 3-star housing, but the vacancy for studios is going up versus other sizes. So I just wanted to add that, since we're talking about, it's great to, get to know our neighbors and so forth, but that would be tricky then if, if they sat vacant. And then also, as someone mentioned about the cars, the larger units with the first proposal would have 2 cars per family, but then you have 9 units and that might be 9 cars. So I think that second point on the cars between the first and second proposal is moot. So I just wanted to kind of point out about the vacancy as as people are trying to assess it and give their opinion, because I see value for both proposals and for the first one as well as the second. It makes sense to me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We have a thumbs up for the shared car idea. Then there's a couple comments about sort of the whole 9 units and that falling under the 10-unit minimum for inclusionary. But again, as you pointed out, you're talking about home ownership, which is a different, inclusionary is rental. So we do have a home ownership program in Cambridge for lottery for low and middle income residents. I don't know how that, and Ram, I don't know how that works in terms of, does it work similar? I should know this, but see, this is why I need you. In terms of inclusionary on the rental side, where there's a 10-unit minimum, for that home ownership program, do we do things like with private market rent developers? Is there a requirement there? How do we get those units?
Yeah, so the inclusionary applies the same numerically, regardless of whether it's a rental building or a homeownership building. So if this were a 10-unit building, there would be 2 affordable units, and we have a homeownership pool waiting list as well as a rental pool. So there are a lot of people who are waiting to purchase first-time homes as well that fall in similar income categories. So that's the typical path. And then there are instances occasionally where we will do a lottery, which we have not done in many years, but we're doing for the first time in about 3 years. It's now open for these 9 units that Councilor McGovern mentioned.
Thank you. More of a comment from the chat. In the in the first instance, the second plan is worse than the first, yet more units squeezed into the lots taller. How much taller are the buildings in the second plan compared to the first?
Do you have these numbers?
In the commercial unit, the top floor of the 3rd floor is at 35. And in the previous scheme, I'm pretty sure we have the same. Sorry, I need to go back. Let me get back to you with the first scheme, but I think we have a headroom for the stair, and it's the same height. So, but it's 2 stories. So it will, at the end, it's the same.
So in terms of the housing units, they're basically first
it's more
plan and the second
massive.
plan, they're essentially the same height.
Yes, because we have a head house. So
And then
stairs that go to the, so
and that height
it will
is-
reach to that same point. Yes.
Sorry, and that height is compliant with zoning and
Yes.
what's around it. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so they're not going to be taller. Okay. Just a comment, just a snapshot in time. From my window, I see 2 empty spots on Cottage Street, and halfway down the odd side of Pearl Street after Cottage is all empty. So another 3 to 4 spots there. And I'm just reading everything so that people, I'm not editing these. So pro, con, or whatever, indifferent. I'm going to read everyone's comments. The argument about the need for more housing is problematic. The question of building as of right aside, there are larger questions about which parts of Cambridge should have responsibility for more housing. The claims about units on the first plan potentially being affordable seems dubious. A 6,000K, 600,000, wait, no, 6,000K studio might be more affordable, but doesn't help working families or people looking for a long-term home with a partner. 500 square feet would be quite small. Yeah, and that's true. And sometimes there are, people buy starter homes, right? And they build equity and their life changes and they move on. So you may not live there and raise, your 2 or 3 kids in a unit that small, but it may be a start. And there's nothing like that, very little like that available in Cambridge now. Mark, please confirm that the bus stop will remain where it is. Adam said that's the plan. I think ultimately that's the MBTA's decision. They were going to move it at one point, and then some folks advocated, and I talked to the MBTA, and some folks in the neighborhood advocated for it to remain where it was originally and not be moved. So that's ultimately going to be a MBTA question, but I don't think they plan on moving it anytime soon. Can you be clear? The only affordable possibility would be for the people running the store.
Is that directed at me?
I guess so, yes. So you basically what you were saying before, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the housing units themselves would not be in either plan, the first or the second, would not be affordable in the sense of falling under some kind of either city or other subsidized program. It's not like it's going to be like the city's program where you pay 30% of your income towards rent, right?
So under the first proposal, yes, there's no affordable option. Under the second proposal, I mean, it could be the metrics, the numbers, just the economics wouldn't work to have one of the townhouse units be affordable. It's too much lost revenue with what we're building. We could maybe have, I'd have to look at this a little closer. Maybe one of the studios could be an affordable unit, and the commercial unit could be more of a market rate commercial unit. Being market rate commercial, I'm still thinking $2,000 to $3,000 a month. So it's still quite affordable to whatever business is going to come in there. We can look at that further. Obviously, this is very preliminary, and we haven't studied this that closely yet because we really just wanted to get reaction to it at this point.
And I don't know if this is necessarily possible, and Aram might kill me, but I wonder if there's the possibility too for the city through the Affordable Housing Trust to purchase a unit or subsidize a unit, where if the cost is if it's cost prohibitive for the developer to do it, could the city step in and say, okay, we'll subsidize one of those units?
We do have that provision. I mean, that is a possibility. In the past, when we've had conversations with developers around that concept, it's been cost prohibitive, but we're happy to have that conversation because it's always, I think the studios are actually, we have a lot of studios in the affordable housing portfolio, and they tend not to be as desirable because for folks who are in those units, they're often a competition between one bedroom and studios, and the prices are not that are usually not that different, even though we charge 25% of people's incomes for studios. But we are happy to have that conversation if Adam and the team are interested in that around the townhouse.
Okay, great. A comment about square footage. 500 might be smaller than a lot of units, but I've lived with my fiance in a 500 to 600 square foot unit for the past 3 years. We'd love the chance to stay here. which I assume is meaning that they're renting now and could maybe buy one of those smaller units. About 70% of households in Cambridge are 1 to 2 people. Next comment. If anyone has walked by the 125 Brookline Street boxes, they are 2 stories, but they're very, very tall stories, basically 35 feet either way.
Full disclosure, we actually developed that property, that project as well.
Just a comment that, it's hard to get mad at a 2 or 3 story building in a residential neighborhood. Our house has been shaking a lot from the construction. Can we get some kind of documentation of the structural soundness of our house now in case something happens to our house from the digging construction? I know this is done for projects when the street is being dug up. For example, I'm at William Street and my neighbor's house, also on William Street, has been shaking a lot. It's a very old structure built in the 1830s.
I think we spoke to this person. They live across the street from the project on William Street. Yeah, we're happy to, typically when we haven't been doing any pile driving, we just knocked the structure down and have been excavating sand essentially. So I'm not sure where the vibration exactly is coming from, but we're happy to look at what's been happening. I think this abutter is about 50 or 60 feet away from where any activity has been taking place.
Across the street.
So just kind of on that a little bit, and then Adam, we talked a little bit about this when we were talking about this meeting. There's a legal definition of abutter, right, which is not a terribly broad definition in most cases. I mean, if you're not directly across the street or adjacent, you're kind of not in the mix, even though you may be affected by the construction that's going on because of all kinds of different reasons. So do you guys have, I know some developers, and again, this is a smaller project than a lot of them, but some developers will have, a website or something that people can look at and see sort of a schedule of, this is what's going to be happening. We're going to be taking parking on these days. We're going to be doing this on these days. Is there anything like that possible so that residents in the neighborhood can just look and, get a sense of how their life might be impacted, even if they're not someone who lives directly across the street?
Yeah, we can look into that. We don't have anything like that currently set up. Just to let everyone on the call know, we are actively working on the unit 1 and unit 2 currently, where we're lucky right now. We have quite a lot of the site open, so a lot of the parking can take place from contractors and so forth inside the site. And we're trying to encourage that. If any, I'm happy to share my email and phone, and if there are any concerns, I welcome emails, phone calls if it's an emergency to address them.
Great, thank you. Someone posted, just got here. Can we see site A, plan A, please? So maybe go back up to there. They can look at that. Next comment. At 1,000 foot, it would at $1,000 a square foot, it would cost 30% more than what the city usually pays for an affordable housing development, roughly 700,000 per square foot or so, not an efficient use of cash. As someone who's going to support option 2, no matter what, I think it's a much more attractive building with much better community benefits. I think it would go a long way in convincing people who are less enthusiastic than I am, if you can commit to locking in one of the residential rents to middle income, like you just suggested. Someone posted that they agree with that comment. The developer offers commercial space as a community benefit, but then adds 4 more units on the lot. What is the financial loss to the developer, if any, for plan 2 as compared with plan 1?
There's currently, if they were all full market rate, there would be a financial gain to the developer, i.e. us, not a financial loss. The financial gain, we haven't calculated exactly, but it'd be, I'd have to look into that. we have a lot more additional risk though, because this permitting process, we don't really know what the permitting process is from here. And it could take us, looking at it from our perspective, just open book, it could take us 9 months to get zoning variances. If we were even successful at getting zoning variances, which I think the likelihood is quite small, to be honest, with all the variances we'd be seeking. Holding the property alone over that time frame would cost us over $100,000 with no guarantees for success. So that's a risk we have to stomach, me and my investment partners, and so it's a challenge. And that makes it challenging to. I mean, do I want to do option 2 pursue it? Of course I want to pursue it, but if there's with the investment partners, if there's no potential upside, there's no reason to do it. And I'm sorry it has to be like that. I don't know why, but that's just that's the way it is.
Yeah. And I think there's something, when we get into these discussions, I think people have to sort of really try to, think about it from different points of view. This is a, private developer who, has a responsibility to their company and their investors to, show a profit on this development. And so, I know we like to say, well, just do this, even though it's going to cost you money and you'll make less. That's not always possible for private developers to do. And so there's a give and take. If the community wants a store and wants a commercial space, they're not going to do that at a loss, whether we want them to or don't. They're business people. So you have to give something to get something in those negotiations. And so maybe it's more units and that offsets the cost of a commercial space. But this is the reality of these conversations. And so, the fact that, obviously they're going to do they're not going to lose money on a deal, right, after investing this money. And so you have to find a way to make it financially viable and, to work for everybody's liking as best you can. And I do think it is, I'm not a developer, but I think the easier way for a developer to go is to do an as of right project where you don't have to go through the BZA and the planning board, or you don't have to come to the council for changes in zoning or anything else. It's easier to do what you're allowed to do. And so there is a level of uncertainty. Adam is right that, to do the second project, which I happen to think I liked because I like more units and I like a commercial space. But to do that, that's less certain than doing something as of right, because they're going to have to go before boards and commissions that you never know what they're going to say and what they're going to do. So it's a further delay, it's more cost, and you don't know how it's going to turn out. You could end up right back at square one. So, that's just kind of the reality of how this process works. Question for the developers. If you have all your permits already approved for the first proposal, who approached you first to spend your office time and labor to draw up the plans for the 9-unit townhouses?
Nobody approached us about that. That was our decision ourselves, and we think the project with the 9 units is a much nicer project, and we like to go forward with that project in some way, and we really wanted to just see what it could look like. And I think Anand did a great job drawing it up. What I think is a very attractive project, and no one approached us about it. We just took it on our own fruition.
Well, I think, people in the neighborhood, when the convenience store was coming down, they would come up and say, oh, I really wish we would have a convenience store here or another commercial space or some sort of retail. And I think that's what prompted the call from the city councilor, because I believe that
Right.
Mark heard the same thing. I don't know the actual people's names that I spoke with, because, we had a lot going on those days, but I think that's how it generated.
In the original project, units 2, 3, and 4 are turning their backs to Pearl Street with few and small openings, which seems not very neighborly. In the commercial option, the buildings are facing Pearl Street, which makes for a much better streetscape. Okay, and then
I
there was
agree-
another,
I agree with
point.
that.
Okay,
I
then there was
agree with
another,
that.
you
We
agree with that?
tried, yeah, we went through a lot of variations to try to make the Pearl Street, add more articulation to the Pearl Street side. We kept on running into zoning issues. On it, we went through 3 or 4 iterations. And I might be able to speak a little more to this, but it was quite challenging to make it work. I don't know, you know more of the details on that?
Yes, I mean, one of the challenge was we have the entries in the window wells, you know, the setbacks were different. So at the end, we flip all the units. And of course, the 5 units will have a nice community space when they all enter in from the same driveway. So we decided to make that, we were resolving the zoning issues, and then we were making the space inside nicer. I agree with the comment, and maybe, you know, those facades still need some work. And, you know, of course, we have that permit is already approved, but I think it's still some room for some redesign to make it nicer. And I'm sure we'll do that if that's the scheme that will go for.
Thank you. Another comment, option 2 appears attractive because you are viewing a finished product picture. I think the commercial space use would need to be further addressed to be more enthusiastic. A vacant commercial unit would not be a good use of space, especially with other neighborhood commercial vacancies nearby. Next question. In the permitted plan, so plan A, what's your anticipated construction schedule?
So if right now we're going forward with the construction of unit 1 and unit 5, because those units will remain the same in either scheme. We have about a 14-month construction timeline for those 2 units. If we were gonna go ahead and try to permit proposal 2, depending on the length of that time of that permitting process, unit 2, 3, and 4 in this scheme would be on hold. And then we'd have, I'd say a 15 to 16-month construction time for either the townhouse units or unit 2, 3, and 4.
What variances would be required for plan B?
I can list off some of them. I'm sure this is not going to be an exhaustive list. Autumn, you can chime in with a few more, and Aram, you probably know as well. We're in the, here, I'll just go to the scheme. It would be a parking relief. I believe we need front yard setback relief. We may need side setback relief, because I believe in the residence C zone, even though this setback is compliant, this setback, actually this is a side setback. That might be okay. I don't know. Do you want to chime in with the,
Yeah, I think we also
GFA?
have, yeah, GFA. And you already mentioned parking. Height, it works, so that complies. So I will say parking, front setback, and FAR.
And lot area per dwelling unit.
Yes, definitely a lot of area per dwelling unit as well.
Yes, that one too.
So you need a number of variances. Next question, person had to leave, but I actually know who this is, so I'll get her the information. But just actually, I think it's more of a comment. I'm an adjacent homeowner and just want to comment that I am not a fan of the second proposal with more units. It's not as attractive. I will be hoping for the 5 units. Thank you all for your information and your time. Next comment, this is more of a sidebar comment than a question to be read, but the commercial space that would work there would be selling, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry, but selling snacks and beer and open later. But that won't happen in Cambridge, America for a lot of reasons. See, there's no suggestion that the developers are going to, quote, lose money on either deal. The only issue is how much. So the developer is saying that he and his investors will make more money on it, and that's supposedly the trade-off for taking more risk. However, much of the Pearl Street market been idealized as commercial space. It was of minimal value in terms of what it provided for decades. So unless there is a solid sense that setting aside room for commercial space would realistically make a meaningful difference in terms of what it offers to the neighborhood, it is not worth the kinds of trade-offs being offered. That was, comment was answered. Can you show us the finished drawings of Pearl Street view again on the second proposal? Thanks.
I can stop on one of these schemes if there's either one that you prefer.
Yeah, she doesn't say. I do have to say, in general, I would love to see some of these renderings in like the middle of winter when everything's dark and snow. We always get these beautiful renderings like everything's a sunny day. I think there's a reason for that. So that was the end. Oh wait, maybe there's one more. No, one more just says thank you. That's perfect. That was the slide. That is the end of the questions and comments in the chat. Anyone else? I don't want to keep people if there's no more. There we go. The removal of the store is turning the neighborhood into, and then it stops.
Jeff, why don't you unmute yourself and then people could see you or hear you as a long time resident of this neighborhood.
Yes.
Hi, Jeff.
I do. I just want to say that the removal of the store is really turning the neighborhood into a dormitory, and it's taking away the diversity of this neighborhood that had many stores and many commercial spaces that were able to provide many different options for people. And also it meant that there were people keeping an eye on the neighborhood and interacting with everybody else. By making it just a bunch of residences, we're turning what was a very rich kind of neighborhood into a very small, it's a very small community which has less and less options. And I really regret the going of the store. I think that our neighborhood has been becoming less and less diversified, and I regret that. I also regret, of course, the affordable housing. There is no affordable housing in this presentation, except possibly a little bit for somebody who would start the store. Anyway, that's my point of view.
Thanks, Jeff. And I know some people have gone, I have a long history with Pearl Street Market, including playing on their Little League team for a season back in the day. And I know that I also, I grew up not too far away and hung out with a lot of kids in Cambridgeport. I also worked at Far Academy for 7 years, which is the therapeutic school down the street. So my job during lunch was store duty. So I was in the store every day for 7 years. And I know that it went through a lot of changes, and in a lot of ways towards the end, as we've heard, was sort of a shell of itself. But I also do remember when that store was incredibly vibrant and active and really a gathering place for kids in the neighborhood and people in the neighborhood. So if we do, if the plan does go forward to put a commercial space in, I prefer to think of what that space could be for the neighborhood than what that space has been for the last several years for the neighborhood. If it goes back sort of kind of the way it was over the last several years, maybe that's not the gain. But I think there's also great opportunity there to really make it into something that is a gathering place. It is something that is more beneficial for the neighborhood. So I think that's an opportunity. Next comment, I'm a homeowner on Pearl Street, 3 blocks away, and I also prefer proposal 1. Thank you. Next comment, I'm strongly in favor of any affordable housing solution. And second most important to me as a resident is a commercial space. I love the potential of a local business or project. Next comment, the matters which have been discussed aside, realizing the sense of the developer and other investors needed to squeeze as much as they can from the lots, yet another set of the larger scale box-like structures in this neighborhood is an aesthetic pox on the neighborhood. Neil, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, sorry, I would have put this in chat, but computer sort of froze. So now I'm on my phone. Yeah, so I live, like I mentioned, across the street, and since people are giving opinions, I think the second option would be much better. Really value the commercial space. There would be more housing, and it would be significantly more affordable. There would be more families that could live there, as well as more non-families. There's the first proposal, there were 5 quote unquote family-sized units, whereas in the second there would be at least 6 that are 2 bedrooms or more, and as well as studios for a lot of people like me that live nearby. I think, as some people have said in the chat, if there can be some contribution or commitment to income restricted affordable housing, whether that's by making, selling a unit to the city or making a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust, I think that would be that would definitely go a long way for raising enthusiasm from people nearby around option 2. But I'm in favor of it regardless. But thank you so much for taking the time to go over the project.
Thank you.
2 more comments. I live on Decatur Street, a couple of blocks away, and I am in favor of number 2. Just wanted to add, I appreciate the conversation here and the good faith efforts on all parties to make a decision that's best for the neighborhood. Thanks, Mark and Adam and others. Next comment, all kinds of diversity is being lost with each new development. Before the store, we lost a Black-owned business, a hair salon, an immigrant-owned fabulous small Tunisian restaurant that did stay in Cambridge with less ambiance, and an auto body shop, all 3 for just 2 homes. We have 2 Teslas. Cambridge gets more taxes, of course, but it is a bigger issue. Next comment, I have had my hand up for a very long time and never been recognized. LWB, I've read all your questions in the chat and I have not seen your hand up. So I don't know what that glitch is. Mr. Miller is yet speaking again. Clearly you favor plan 2. In this stage, perhaps it would be more appropriate to hear everyone out now and then follow on discussions before waiting in the way you have. Okay, well, I am chairing this meeting as hoping to get community input. I'm not sure. I've read every single comment that's been read, and I've called on everyone that's had their hand up, and your comments have been read, LWB, several times. So I'm sorry if we have a difference of opinion, but please don't accuse me of being underhanded in this process. Anybody else? If the next comment, if there is a goal to hear everyone, I am definitely in favor of option 2. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, the chat's still open. Adam, I want to thank you and your team for being here, as I mentioned at the beginning.
Mark, you have a question
I
from
do.
Barbara. Barbara's raising her hand in real life.
Oh, in real life. I don't see that because it doesn't show. Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I want to speak to the diversity thing. I've been in the neighborhood for 45 years, and it was so vital. We had, the others have mentioned the stores. We had TT the Bears right on the corner of Pearl, which was very popular. And the other stores that were mentioned, and the body shop and the garage. It was what Jane Jacobs describes as an ideal arrangement of diversity of incomes, diversity of business, and a small business and residences. And that's change. It's hard for some of us to see it change into, was Jeff was describing, a bedroom community without having the chance to socialize with people at the businesses and the local stores. And I know the last business wasn't that vital, but when I was first here, there was a very, when the Caragianis had it, I could buy meat, I could buy vegetables, I could buy a lot of things in that store. And then it went downhill. So I miss the diversity. I don't know if it can come back, but it's certainly what made this neighborhood much more vital, much more neighborly.
Yeah. Question.
Hi, I have put a lot, I just wanted, it's okay. I know we're going to be ending soon. Hi, Barbara and Jeff. I've lived in this, I am a homeowner, lived here for about 21 years. And I'm a little bit younger than Barbara and Jeff. They're my mentors. But we are in this really tough situation. This meeting is very, very white, skews very white. It's not very diverse, right? And Cambridge is becoming richer and whiter. So the city council is the one who needs to be, take a development like that. I'm not anti-development. I'm absolutely not. And I think probably, dare I say, I would support proposal number 2 if it were bolder and did have some below market rate units. And it's not very exciting. It's not, quite frankly. But I understand the cost effectiveness, and they're not going to make as much profit. I understand all of that. But from a longtime homeowner's perspective, we are losing so much. In the little time that I've been here compared to Barbara and Jeff, we've lost so much, and it's really a crying shame. So,
I agree.
And I think, Marianne, you mentioned, there are a lot of discussions happening at the council and around the city now about zoning. Zoning is sort of a reflection of what you want, right? So back in the 90s, actually, much of the city was down zoned, including Cambridgeport, because people they didn't want taller buildings or more units. They wanted more single family and 2-family units. And so that's what you get. And so we're looking at, how can we?
It's because nobody wants a taller unit right next to a small unit. I mean, that just doesn't work, right?
So we have to look at what zoning allows, right? And what zoning incentivizes, right? So it can allow a couple different things, but if it's more profitable to build a single family home, that's what most developers are going to do. And that's what you see. I mean, you see in certain parts of the city where someone will knock down a triple decker and it's illegal to build that triple decker again, but they can build a massive single family that they sell for $3 million. That's zoning, right? If we zone that differently to allow that triple decker to be built again, maybe you would get more, you would get that. So these are conversations that are happening. So people should sort of stay tuned for that.
So then it turns into a bedroom community, right? Like it turns into something very different than.
But here's, if you want, you're not going to get in the, let's be realistic. You're not going to get single family homes that are going to sell for $600,000 in the city of Cambridge that are standalone single family homes. It's just the land cost alone isn't going to allow that to happen. So, this idea that we're going to go back to being able to build homes like people were able to buy 30 years ago, that just doesn't happen. So we're going to have to look at, how do we change zoning to allow, more units would you rather have a single family home that sells for 3 million, or would you rather have 3 condos that sell for $1 million each? Both outrageously expensive. I couldn't afford either one of them. But these are the kinds of things we have to discuss and decide. So we really, the zoning is our avenue to try and if we want something different, then we have to change the zoning to allow
So
that.
Jeff writes, why not have a single family home for 600,000 with city support? The city, this is a rich city. Like, look, we spend more money per kid in our public schools than, you know, than any town in the whole state of Massachusetts, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it's a rich city that the real estate taxes for commercial, right? We keep our residential taxes really low to keep it diverse. So that's true. There's a huge residential break for if you live in your home.
Yeah.
Our taxes are lower than all the towns around here. So crazy. So wealthy folks are actually coming in and spending money on a house, living in it, and get a huge tax break compared to if they lived in Wellesley or somewhere else, right? I mean, I'm aware of that because there's so much taxes that come in from Kendall Square and, you know, from commercial. It's a bigger issue.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what, you
complicated.
know.
I mean, my point is that it's complicated, and there's, you know,
The city should buy property like this. The city should buy property like this and develop it and have it be mixed income and have some units be really high that support the ones that are lower income. If we really want to talk the talk of Cambridge is not going to be diverse anymore.
well,
It's just,
there's, you know,
Just to-
I actually, I agree. I'd love the city to buy as much property as it can so that we can then control sort of what happens there. There's certainly, it's not your neck of the woods, but on the other side of town, the city just bought the BB&N fields on the corner of Larch and Fresh Pond Parkway. With, you know, the plan, my understanding is there's going to be housing, you know, we're going to look at that to be housing, and what kind of housing, and, you know, all that stuff kind of has to be figured out and squared away. But yeah, I mean, certainly, you know, if there's more property in our control, you know, that's I think that's a better thing. I want to move on to some of these other. Oh, there was a question. The store in the second plan, is that going to be? I think it's going to be rental, right? Not for someone to buy, because you were talking about $1,000 a month. So I assume you're talking about.
Yeah, it's gonna be rental.
Okay. Question for Iram. Is allowing more corner stores part of the broader zoning conversation that's happening?
Um,
And
There
restaurants, et cetera.
Yeah, there's not a citywide conversation, but we often find that when we are having conversations in a particular district, then there is interest in thinking about that. The challenge truly right now is just the changing nature of retail and what is able to survive. A lot of it has to do with people shopping more online. And Cambridge, even though we really value all of us, and I live in Cambridge, so I'm just as guilty of this as everybody else. While we all want our corner stores and retail along every avenue, Cambridge folks shop more online than even other cities and towns in our neighborhood. So these are not things that help support retail space. And as Adam was mentioning, you know, the kinds of values that a developer is able to get per square foot, whether it's rental or ownership for residential, which is a lot less than a commercial space. I mean, commercial as an office or lab. The retail space actually is a loss leader no matter what the upper floors are. And so it's always a tricky thing to convince a developer to do that. And I think the example, especially if it's embedded in the neighborhood, the kind of corner store model rather than in a cluster of retail or an avenue. The Massey's hardware store is kind of the classic example where there was a store and the neighborhood wanted a particular kind of use, and that's been sitting vacant for years because they've just not been able to find a tenant. And a vacant store is probably is worse than not having a store at all.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, and certainly that point of, you know, visiting. I remember when Riles sold, and I assume everyone knows Riles. And someone came to see me at City Hall, a resident in the neighborhood, and said, you know, you have to stop them from closing Riles. And I said, well, it's a private sale. I can't stop them from selling their business. But then I said, well, how often did you go? And they said, oh, once or twice a year. Well, that's why the store closed, because I saw the owner showed me his books and he was losing, $50,000, $60,000 a year and couldn't keep it running anymore. So, let's support our local businesses as best we can if we want them, because that's how they make money. Someone put in the comment to build the number of homes just to satisfy the Cambridge residents on the affordable housing wait list, it would cost about $2.5 billion. So that's something to keep in mind. There are, according to the CHA, there are about a little over 20,000 people on the on their affordable housing wait list. Of those 20,000+, about 7,000 of them are people who live or work in Cambridge. So even if you took just that list, there's about 7,000 people who are connected to our city in some way, who are in need of affordable housing. So it is a huge need for us. Has the city, again, another comment for mixed use, mixed income housing, has the city ever developed mixed income housing?
Yes. Recent examples are, actually, probably the largest example is at Trolley Square up on North Mass Ave, which is mixed income. And there are some projects that have mixes of income that are all affordable. So everybody is below 100% of the area median income, but there are some who are, some are reserved for very, very low income and some for higher in that spectrum. And I just wanted to touch for a moment on the question about, does the city acquire land? And the city acquires land for affordable housing all the time, but we do it through our affordable housing developers. So the builders who actually build, whether they're nonprofits or not. And we fund that through the Affordable Housing Trust. So just wanted to say that that is something that we try to do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't believe that this was a parcel that any of our builders were looking at, but we certainly are always keeping our eyes open for opportunities throughout the city.
Right. So if you look at the project out Finch, right on Concord Ave, like heading out towards Belmont next to the Burger King, that was property that was bought, largely with the trust, and then HRI developed it into affordable housing. And as Aram said, in those buildings, there is a wide definition of who qualifies. So you might, if you have, let's say one of those is a 3-bedroom and you have a family that makes, around $120,000 a year, but qualifies for that unit, they could also be in a building with someone who was formerly homeless that got a voucher where the income guidelines are waived and they get a unit in that building. So you could have somebody, it is mixed, but it's not like someone who's earning $2 million a year, but you could have someone making 120,000 and someone who has no income at all in the same building. So there is some variety there. And that holds true even for the public housing under the CHA, as well, as you have people who live in public housing that have different levels of income as well. So I think this is a question, but I think it's more of a comment. How do places like Montreal create those wonderful neighborhoods? It is the courage to have a different vision of what is possible. What is the next steps after? What are the next steps and takeaways from here?
That's a very good question. That's a question I've been asking myself for the last 30 minutes. I think more conversation is needed. I think actually a conversation with Mark and Aram, just to see, trying to get variances with real hardships is not possible for this site. I don't see, I've been before the zoning board on many occasions for other projects, some with real hardship. Here there's no real hardship. So maybe changing the zoning is an option. That's a good question. And I don't really have, I don't have a good answer for it.
And as far as changing zoning, just, we cannot, we would have to go to our city solicitor. We have to be careful of what's called spot zoning. We cannot
Right.
change zoning for one particular project.
Right,
So if
understood.
we were going to change zoning to allow option 2 or something else, that zoning would have to be changed for a much larger area of Cambridgeport, maybe not the entire neighborhood of Cambridge. That's what the solicitor would have to comment on, but we could not do it just for this lot. So it would
Right.
impact, other streets and other parts of the neighborhood. I don't know how much.
I know
but-
that's a very hot topic right now. There's a lot of discussion going on about that. And I think, it's a grander plan. I think the city doesn't want to piecemeal it.
Okay.
So
So that's,
I
yeah,
don't really
that's,
have-
I'm not sure where we could go with that or not. We'd have to find out more. Next comment, thank you for listening. I would love to see a public-private partnership in Cambridge with thoughtful designs and units around 800 square feet to 2,000 square feet, not necessarily bigger than that, like the outskirts of Amsterdam. Okay, so we are at, what are we, 7:45. Last call, as they say. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Sort of the other.
All right, thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm certainly more than happy to put another meeting together, like this. If folks want me to.
Hello?
Even if, you don't necessarily need me to do it. Adam, if you want to
Thank
do it on your own, but I'm certainly happy to help as things.
Great help, Mark.
As things move forward. So what I'm gonna do, so in terms of the recording and in terms of, if people want any kind of follow-up, Adam, could you put your email in the chat?
Sure.
Okay, so Adam's gonna do that. Folks obviously have my email. If people want to email me to get information for you, I'm happy to do that. I will put this, the link to the video on the Cambridgeport Neighborhood Listserv. If folks want to, some folks here may not be members of that listserv. So if you want a recording, just email me and I'll send it to you. And then I'll throw it up on social media and in my newsletter if folks get my weekly newsletter as well. But I can help you get whatever information you want if you just want to email me. I think most people have it, but I will put it in the chat. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking your time, for being here and for your thoughtful questions and comments. I think this is sort of what I kind of expected is, there's going to be things that people like and don't like, and people are going to have different opinions about what they like and don't like. It makes this all very complicated, but I hope everybody continues to stay at the table and talk and work together. Something's obviously going to go here, and let's work together to make sure it's something that gets the most out of this space. And Adam, I thank you again and your team for considering different options and for basically listening to everybody. Again, there've been some developers that haven't had to do that, and I've asked them to have meetings and they say, nah, no thanks, we don't have to, so they choose not to, which I tend to think is a poor decision. So I do appreciate it when people are willing to, that you're willing to be here, even though you don't have to be, and look forward to ongoing conversation. All right, so I don't see any more questions. So again, thank you, everybody. More to come, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Mark.